So I just got to see Out of Darkness, this brand new, weird, prehistoric horror film from director Andrew Cummings. The movie was produced by Bleecker Street, which is kind of like this weird new production studio I had never heard of before like a month ago, but now I'm seeing a bunch of movies from them. So yeah, great job, Bleecker Street. This movie takes place 40,000 years ago, and we follow a group of humans who are very prehistoric humans. They're very Stone Age-esque. They're living off the land, living off, fire. They're traveling, they're hunting, they're hunters and gatherers or whatever. And they're a very small pack, kind of a family. A lot of them are actual family, and some of them are just kind of like a part of this pack, and they end up coming into conflict with some malevolent force. They come into contact with this force that is evil and is trying to either hunt them or kill them or kidnap them, and they have to deal with that. Now, I said in a previous video talking about this movie and the trailer for it that this movie kind of reminded me, trailer-wise, of Robert Eggers meets M. Night Shyamalan. It looked like the essence of Robert Eggers when it comes to sort of building this world, this prehistoric world, in a very natural way, and selling the world and selling the time period and grounding it in that reality, while also telling a really interesting horror story that might delve into the supernatural, right? So both of those things I thought were going to be in this movie, sort of, but at the same time, after seeing it, probably neither were actually in it. Either aspects, I would say. I would say this movie is closer to like a Robert Eggers style movie. It's definitely not M. Night Shyamalan. There is no M. Night Shyamalan here. When I say M. Night Shyamalan, I mean both the good and the bad. There's neither. But I don't know, this is a weird movie. I don't really know how to review this, because I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna tell you right now, I didn't love it, but I could see why a lot of people would love this, and why it would be one of their favorite horror movies of the year. So I'm going to be careful in how I review this, and I'm going to try to give you my base opinion, just my feelings on how I viewed the movie and why it didn't exactly work for me, but I'm also going to be honest about why this is a very well-made movie, and a movie that maybe you'll want to see. First off, the movie looks amazing. Cinematography here is second to none. It is absolutely beautiful. It's stunning. The way they use lighting in this movie is super important, because it is prehistoric, so the lighting has to be either natural or it has to look very natural. And the film was called Out of Darkness. They use darkness very well. They use darkness as a lighting choice more than actual light. There's a scene early on in this film where they're around this campfire, and everything outside of this campfire is just kind of like a brick wall of black, of darkness, and they kind of do like this weird gimmicky scene with it that actually really worked. I thought it was one of the best parts of the movie, because I thought it looked cool, and they use darkness throughout the whole movie. There are some points where they kind of, there were scenes where characters entered the dark away from the fire, and they still wanted the audience to be able to see the characters, but they had established earlier in the film that outside of the light, the small pieces of light that they have, it's just pitch black. They established that earlier in the film, but then when they go into the pitch black later in the film, it's covered in moonlight, right? Of course, because you gotta be able to see. And the moonlight, I just didn't think looked anywhere near as natural as anything else earlier in the film. So that's like my only gripe on the way they lit the movie. But other than that, it looks phenomenal. Also, the sound design and the score here are great. It felt kind of like The Revenant. It grounded us in that world, in that reality, and it kind of felt very prehistoric. I loved it a lot. I thought it sounded and the music was all great. Performances here, I also thought it was great. I don't recognize any of these actors, but, if I see them again, I'll remember them from this. I thought they were all decent. They all stood out to me, some of them, the guy that played the old dude was really great. I loved him. Some of them were a little quiet, didn't have a lot to, work with, but for the most part, they all did a good job. Well, the next thing I want to talk about is, do they actually ground you in this setting? It's really hard to do a prehistoric movie, because half the movie has to be setting up a believable setting. When you do a movie like this, for example, when you look at The Northman, which is a Robert Eggers movie, the first part of the movie is setting up the world. Now, that's not prehistoric, but it's a very old times movie, or taking place in this Viking era, and you need to sell that era before you can really get into the revenge story. You can't just immediately jump into the revenge story, and he does a lot of work building that world. He did the same thing with The Witch, The Lighthouse. Any movie that takes place in that sort of time period, you have to set the stakes. This film, I think, kind of does an okay job. I don't know if it really worked for me, though. Yes, they speak the language. They look and feel like hunters and gatherers, but there was just something really off about this that never fully engulfed me or really like immersed me in this world. Now, that might just be me. Then we also have to talk about the scares. This is a horror movie. At least it's advertised as a horror movie. it didn't work for me. I'm just gonna be honest. This type of horror is not really my type of thing. It's a movie that relies heavily on its audience to be immersed in the actual tension of what's happening with the characters, and if you're not immersed in that, the scares just don't work at all. And for me, that's kind of where I was. I was not afraid for these people. I was not scared at what was going on, because just the earlier setup in the movie didn't really work for me. And maybe it'll work for you, and then the scares will work great. But this entity that is kind of hunting them and attacking them, it just never felt as much of a threat as I wanted it to be. And listen, there's a reason for that, and I don't want to spoil nothing, and I'll leave that all for you guys to go watch the movie and everything, but it's not as straightforward as there's just like some big monster that's killing them all, right? There is a twist in this movie that I will not spoil, but for me, the twist wasn't satisfying. Just for me. For a lot of people, it will be. Thematically, for the script, it works. For the story that they were trying to tell here, the twist and what they end up, leading to at the end of the story, it makes sense. It's pretty much the only thing they could have done. It makes a lot of sense. But me going into the movie, what I was picturing for it, then watching the movie the first half, what I was still picturing for it, and then what it ended up being, I just kind of felt like lost and not really happy. Like it made the movie not work for me even more, and it was already not working for me. And this movie's pacing, I just didn't think was great. It's probably the worst part about the movie. I just thought the pacing was weird. The movie's only an hour and 20 minutes long. It's a very short movie. But god dang, man, did it feel like it was 2.5 hours long. This thing felt long. It felt super, super long and dragged out. And that's because of the pacing, and I think it's because of the first act. The movie definitely ramps up in the latter half of it, and it definitely speeds up, and there's some violence and some stuff that really does work well, but the first half of this just, I don't know, it just moves super slow for me. So I don't know, I don't want to be too harsh on this, because yet again, this is a movie that, like, just looking at it while I was watching, it's like, I get why so many people would love this. It looks amazing, everything sounds great, the music's great, a lot of these scares are really creative, a lot of the stuff they do with the camera's creative, the story thematically makes a lot of sense and is actually kind of interesting and has an interesting conversation about humanity and our roots. Like, there's some good stuff here that just definitely works for some people, and for other people it doesn't, and I'm just in the category of people it didn't really connect with, and because of that, I will give Out of Darkness a 2.5 out of 5. I'm not going to give it any lower than that, because it's a good movie. It really is a solid movie, and I think a lot of people are going to like this one. Just wasn't my cup of tea.
It was my cup of tea.
Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Make sure to like this video, click the video on your screen right now, and subscribe.